Welcome back to the channel where I provide regular cricket content on interesting topics. Today's video is a move away from Test cricket, whereby I am going to be starting a series of the all-time one-day international sides, starting with the West Indies. What with the World Cup around the corner, I thought it would be interesting to have a look at some of the greatest one-day players ever. Picking an all-time one-day side is actually a bit more challenging than the Test versions. I say this because the game of Test cricket, baseball aside, hasn't changed as much as the one-day arena. In the 80s a good one-day score was 250, but now with shorter boundaries and power plays 300 is just about competitive. With that in mind, it is hard to compare strike rates for batsmen and economy rates for bowlers. In my head, what I am going to do is morph all the older players into current day, to for example consider how Ian Botham would have played with the shorter boundaries. With that all covered, shall we get started? Number 1, Chris Gayle, average 37.3, strike rate 87.2. A player from the modern era and a white ball legend in his own right. A huge presence in any side both for his physicality and infectious personality. He may have been playing in times of shorter boundaries, but I don't think it would matter too much for the universe boss. I don't think I have ever seen a player with an ability to hit such a long ball. What is also of note is the fact he was a tidy bowler in the one-day game as well, taking 167 wickets at a more than respectable 35. For me, Gayle opening up is a no-brainer, so he takes the first spot. Number 2, Gordon Greenidge, average 45, strike rate 64.9. Opening up with Gayle is another legend of the game in Gordon Greenidge. The Barbadian has an excellent record in one-day cricket and was probably one of the first opening greats. In 128 games he scored 1134 50s, showing that he regularly got the Windies off to solid starts. He is probably best known for his scintillating performance in the World Cup of 1979, where he was the player of the tournament, scoring 253 runs in 4 innings. Legendary stuff, and more than good enough to earn him a spot in my side. Number 3, Lara, average 40.9, strike rate 79.5. A surprisingly mediocre record in one-day cricket for the Windies great left me indecisive about if I should have him in the side. But as the saying goes, sometimes records are for DJs. It is not as if Lara didn't have some memorable performances for the West Indies in the one-day world, it's just he wasn't quite as prolific as he was in the Test game. Still though, over 10,000 one-day runs isn't to be sniffed at. His best knock in coloured clothing was probably his 169 against Sri Lanka in 1995. This was on a turning pitch against a very talented bowling attack including Murali and others. Whilst he will always be remembered for his escapades in whites, Lara is too good of a shot maker to not make my side, so he is coming in at number 3. Number 4, Viv Richards, average 47, strike rate 90. Do you remember when at the start of this video I said that I might have to give those from the 80s a little bit of slack due to how the game has evolved? Well, no slack required for the Master Blaster, as even with the ropes on the advertising boards and no fielding restrictions, his stats stack up to anyone of any era. A destroyer of attacks in both Test and one-day internationals, Viv deserves all the adulation he gets. He is after all credited with the consensus best one-day innings of all time. In 1984, in a game at Old Trafford against England, his talents were on full display. He scored 189 not out off of 170 balls. This was out of a total of just 272. England in reply only made 168, so the press gladly pointed out that he had beaten the England side on his own. Viv therefore is a shoo-in for this side, and almost any other side you could name. Number 5, Shai Hope, average 50.4, strike rate 76.7. A lot has been said about the current state of West Indies cricket, both on my channel and in the wider press. Some believe the game to be practically finished in the Caribbean, others are slightly more optimistic. I find players like Hope to be cause for optimism, as it demonstrates there is still talent out there to be nurtured. If you don't believe me, then perhaps you should believe the ICC, who on 2 occasions have had him in their one-day team of the year, 2020 and 2022. Hope has a record to rival almost anyone in one-day cricket, with just under 5,000 runs scored and 1500s. Hope was also the second fastest batsman to reach 3,000 runs in one-day cricket history, doing so in just 67 innings. He is not a blaster like Gayle, but he can still clear the boundary with ease when he gets into his stride. For his temperament and not too shabby wicket-keeping ability, he has to be in my side. He bats at number 5 and takes the gloves. Number 6, Clive Lloyd, average 39.5, Strike rate 81.2. I foolishly left Lloyd out of my West Indian Test 11 and felt the wrath in the comments about it. Well, I am not going to make the same mistake twice. Lloyd's inclusion, however, is not just me trying to right a wrong. It is for his skills as a batsman, his ability to perform on the big stage and his captaincy. How could I leave out the man who lifted the first 2 Cricket World Cups after all? He was not just lifting them, however, he was also securing them, especially in 1975. When the Windies were in a fair amount of trouble at 50 for 3, Lloyd strolled to the crease and proceeded to play one of World Cup's greatest innings. His 102 off 85 balls dragged the West Indies to a good score, one which Australia would fall just short of. Lloyd was also an excellent tactician and motivator, so he'll captain my side and bat 6. Number 7, Kieron Pollard, batting average 26.1, bowling average 39.2. This was probably the hardest spot for me to fill. I was looking for a hard-hitting, closing batsman who could bowl a few overs should be required. There were a few options on the table, including Carl Hooper, Phil Simmons and Dwayne Bravo. I went for Pollard as to me he is the cleanest striker out of the bunch. He probably is best known for his performances in the T20 game, but he has had plenty of strong performances in the one-day world also. Pollard has 300s in the one-day game, including a pressure-laden effort in Chennai which was impressive. He is actually a decent captain as well, with a strong record leading the Windies. Not that I would swap him for Lloyd, of course, but it shows he has a cricketing brain to go with the brawn. Bowling-wise, although his contributions there have waned through his career, he still has a solid record and interestingly a good strike rate of just over 40. Number 8, Jason Holder, batting average 24.9, bowling average 37. Again, another tricky spot. The question I was asking myself was, do I load up with bowling firepower but leave a long tail? Or do I go with someone who could possibly help chase down a result in a tight game? I went for Holder, obviously to add depth to the batting. When you see the dedicated bowlers, you'll see why I have confidence in them. Unlike some in the comments section, I really rate Holder. For a long time he was battling with Ben Stokes for the best all-rounder in the world in the ICC rankings, so he can't be doing too much wrong. I do believe he has been loaded up with a fair amount of pressure in recent years, and that has shown in some of his performances. But if you put Holder in a team like this, then the spotlight wouldn't be on him as much, and I believe he would shine. His one-day record is actually pretty ordinary, but for an all-rounder I am happy with the strength he brings. 12 one-day 50s and a strike rate of over 90 shows he can really do a job down the order. Some may disagree, but he makes my side. Number 9, Malcolm Marshall, bowling average 27. Out of all of the West Indian greats during the 70s and 80s, Marshall was probably my favourite. He didn't have the physical attributes of some of the others, so had to get by with skill and doing things slightly differently. I did waver a bit when I saw his stats in one-day cricket, and I started out with Holding in his place. But what is often forgotten about with Marshall is that he was no mug with the bat. Not that you pick a number 9 for their batting, but if you're trying to win a tight game, then having someone who can hang around is helpful. Number 10, Joel Garner, bowling average 18.8. Big Bird is one of my first picks in any West Indian side. Interestingly, some people wanted him out of my Test 11 for reasons I can't quite fathom. The polar opposite to Marshall, Holding could generate bounce from nearly any wicket anywhere in the world. Watching footage of him ply his trade, and it seemed like no one was ever truly comfortable. This goes for Test cricket and the one-day game. Probably Garner's standout performance in the shorter format was his 5 for 38 in the 1979 World Cup final, to win the game for the Windies. As a side note, this game highlights perfectly how one-day cricket has progressed. England opened the batting with Geoffrey Boycott in this game, who was universally known as the slowest batsman in cricket. But back to Garner, and let's face it, 146 wickets at under 19 is going to get in any side in the world, including this one. Number 11, Curtly Ambrose, bowling average 24.1. Anyone who has paid attention to my channel will know of my admiration for Ambrose. My view is that he was like McGrath in terms of accuracy, but he had more pace, aggression and bounce. This led him to be not only the best bowler of the 90s in my eyes, but whisper it gently, possibly the greatest of all time. In the one-day game he also excelled. His record isn't quite as good as it was in the Test arena, but it is still excellent. Ambrose saved his best performances against Australia with 3 out of his 4 one-day 5-wicket hauls against the Aussies. An economy rate of under 3.5 is impressive, and he was a constant wicket-taker for the Windies also. Overall he was a wicket-taker and could also dry up runs. so any captain in history would have been happy to have him in their side. That concludes this West Indies all-time one-day side, and I think it is a great 11. Carl Hooper was unlucky to miss out. If you swapped him for someone like Pollard, then I won't argue with you. I would be looking to Gayle to bowl a few overs of spin to provide some variation, but that is something Hooper obviously offers also. What do you think? Who would you replace in the side? I am quite confident in this one, but by all means try and change my mind in the comments. As ever, thank you everyone for viewing and participating.